Hi, I'm John Mark Young, President and Chief Investment Officer of Whitaker-Myers Wealth Managers, and I'd like to welcome you to another installment of Whitaker-Myers Wealth Managers, What We Learned in the Markets This Week video. Remember, our aim is to provide you, our valued clients, with a brief video giving you information that's helpful to your understanding of the markets from a biblical worldview with no financial agenda, which of course makes us uniquely different from the news media in America. As a reminder, this video is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon to make investment decisions. Clients of Whitaker-Myers Wealth Managers may maintain positions in the securities discussed, and all opinions discussed are solely those of John Mark Young and not those of Whitaker-Myers Wealth Managers or the Whitaker-Myers Group. So let's talk about the 4 things we learned in the markets this week, starting with point number 1. And point number 1 was the month of April, from the stock market's perspective, it's over. It ended, of course, Friday of this week, and Thursday and Friday of this week saw a very strong note from a stock market perspective. Probably the most compelling story this week has been company earnings and their results, which have come in not as weak as expected. Analysts expected at the end of last month that companies in the S&P 500, which of course are the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the U.S., and again, to bring it back to our Dave Ramsey vernacular, that is comprising of growth stocks and growth and income stocks. So analysts expected them to see earnings decline of about 6%. So before the quarter started, earnings decline 6% was the consensus. Thanks to strong numbers, some of which came out this week, analysts now only expect a fall of 3.4% for the quarter. Although not all of earnings reports are great and optimistic and all that, one of which this week was UPS, which dropped nearly 8% for the week when they saw and announced slowing consumer demand in retail, which would lower shipping rates in the second half of this year. And of course, since we buy everything online, retail pretty much is online, which means FedEx and UPS have a hand in it. Stocks that reported this week also were Meta, or Facebook, which is a staple in our moat strategy from Van Eck. And they posted a sales increase for the first time in nearly a year after we're still working through their year of efficiency, as Mark Zuckerberg calls it, or in another word, they're finally cutting costs, which is something that Silicon Valley hasn't done in a long time. One of Tesla's larger competitors, General Motors, released earnings this week, and they beat profit expectations, and they lifted their earnings outlook. However, the stock slumped partly because it's dropping its first electric vehicle ever, their baby in the electrical vehicle space, the Chevy Bolt, and that was getting dropped because of some battery issues and creating some fires. Profits are still flowing at Exxon and Chevron, to use a phrase, who collectively showed $18 billion in first quarter earnings. Amazon's first quarter sales blew past the analyst targets. However, because of a slowdown in their cloud computing business, their shares dropped 4%. And that's a key. Remember, stocks are always looking forward regardless of what's happening now. So good results now don't necessarily mean higher stock price. It's what's going to happen in the future. Intel, who's building a $20 billion facility in Columbus, Ohio, they reported sales ahead of analyst expectations, but they actually lost money. They made more top line, but lost money for the quarter. And finally, Microsoft saw revenue rise 7% from a year earlier, and their outlook was very positive for the future, which pushed their stock up 8% right away after their earnings announcement, ended the day up around 7%. Now, one thing we talk about every week, initial claims for unemployment insurance, those getting benefits because they lost their job and were not able to find a new one, that went down again this week to 230,000, proving people are not staying out of work very long when they lose their job. And finally, the S&P 500, which is our proxy for growth and income stocks, but only when taken together, don't do it independently, was up 0.87 for the week. The Russell 2000, which tracks aggressive growth, smaller companies, that was down 1.33%. And the MSCI EFA, which tracks international stocks outside the U.S., they were down 0.01, basically flat for the week. Now let's look at the month, since we just ended the month of April. The S&P 500 for the month, again, our proxy for growth and income when taken together, was up 1.46%. The Russell 2000, which tracks smaller companies, aggressive growth, was negative 1.79%, the only one negative for the month. And finally, the MSCI EFA, which tracks non-U.S. international stocks, was positive 2.94%, taking the crown for the month of April, and that's no surprise to anybody that's watched this video. Point number 2, U.S. GDP was released this week, and as a reminder, U.S. GDP helps us, those that track the economy, measure the economic growth of the U.S. economy during any time period. While there's certainly flaws with tracking GDP, it's not perfect, it is generally assumed to be a pretty good measuring stick. For the first quarter of 2023, January through March, U.S. GDP came in at a positive 1.1%. Now, this is a slowdown from the 2.6% GDP came in at the quarter four of 2022, giving some of those in the, look, we're trending towards a recession camp, some more ammo. One thing I would note is that you'll notice that in quarter two of 2022, we actually had a negative GDP number. Yet, they called no recession back then, in my opinion, to help a certain political party in power during their midterms. However, the consensus argument as to why there was no recession then was that even though we had 2 straight quarters of negative GDP, which you just saw on that chart, the fact that the labor market was so strong, that is why we didn't have a recession back then. And that is why I, personally, am now holding them to that same standard. You can't have it both ways, National Bureau of Economics. Labor markets are still incredibly strong, even though GDP did trend downward. The main driver of this quarter's positive GDP number was consumption, personal spending by consumers, and that was fueled because Americans have seen pretty significant raises the last few years, which is continuing to fuel spending. Even this week, we saw PCE, which stands for personal consumption expenditures. That rose to a total number of 18.1 trillion, or a 3.71% increase. And the Fed wants to see that at 2%. So that was higher than they wanted. But this tracks spendings on goods and services in the U.S., and that number is still high, meaning it doesn't bode well for GDP going negative. Again, my opinion there. In the GDP report, housing continued to be a drag, with a residential investment decline of 4.2%. Businesses also pulled back spending and investment in equipment, where we saw a decline of 7.3%. And as a proxy for what economists are predicting for the future, I'm going to use the Wall Street Journal's survey of economists, where they survey a bunch of economists, and they think we'll have another positive quarter of GDP, another positive print in Q2, then go negative in Q3, while barely squeaking out a positive result in Q4. Again, the technical definition of recession is 2 straight negative quarters of GDP, although the National Bureau of Economics gets to make the call. So even the consensus doesn't think the technical definition of a recession is going to get hit, which again would have to be 2 straight quarters. But right now, Wall Street Journal's survey of economists only says 1 quarter. Hence, why I'm still in the wait and see, but definitely leaning, if you watch these videos, towards no recession. Point number 3. Speaking of GDP, some of you might remember the Atlanta Fed's GDP Now model. We talk about that a lot on this video series. This model predicts U.S. quarterly GDP based on economic data points as they come out. So it's moving around in real time. The last time we looked at this report, it gave us a glimpse of what we just learned this week, and they were estimating at that point 2.5% GDP growth. We got 1.1. What's up with that? Well, the problem could be in some of the states that just don't get it, and they're bringing down the economic growth for the entire country. So why would I say that? Or how am I getting that information? Because I shouldn't just say that without data. Philadelphia Fed, they have a report that uses employment, wage, and manufacturing hours work data to kind of surmise the growth of each state. We looked at this about a month ago, if you remember, and it showed New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania as the slowest growers in the country. Now, when we look at it from a quarterly change perspective, guess who is hurting us? The largest state in the country, the largest GDP contributor in the country, California. They were essentially flat. This is not great news for the country as a whole, but it may explain why those of us that are in Texas, in Ohio, in Florida, we're feeling pretty good about the situation because growth is still happening at a pretty good rate in our local economies. So I doubt Gavin Newsom, if he's going to make a claim to the Democratic presidential race, I don't think he should use this chart if he runs for president for his economic platform. And finally, point number 4, Apple, which is probably one of the most impressive companies on the earth, and based out of California, by the way, if not, they may be the most solely impressive company. They just announced it's working on an artificial intelligence, AI-powered health coaching business. Okay, so a coaching business that's not powered by Susie or Billy, but AI. The code name for this service is Quartz, and its objective is to keep us motivated to do all the things we should be doing, such as exercise, improving our eating habits, helping to ensure we get enough and quality sleep. They're going to use the Apple Watch to help make these suggestions and create programs that are specifically tailored to the way that you and I are living our lives. This service will come with a monthly fee and should be out next year or so if it isn't scrapped. Amazon had a similar health service. They just scrapped it as part of their cost-cutting initiatives to improve their financial situations. It's interesting that this is brought up because I was just listening to a podcast of a national investment advisor this week, and he was making the case that very soon most people will live into their hundreds. Now, he made this case based on the advancement in medical technology, such as we're soon going to cure and eradicate many of the diseases that are killing us today, such as cancer and heart disease and those sort of things. And then it's all about the quality of life, and the quality of life is all about the choices you make. Just like with your money, it ties together. The podcast went on to say the highest average age of people today are the Seventh-day Adventists because of their religious views that the body is a temple of God and a gift of God, and thus one way you honor it is to obey God in taking care of it. This has led to higher life expectancy within that denomination, within every race, white, black, Asian, everyone that's a Seventh-day Adventist, they're outliving their other ethnicities that are not in that religious race. And that's just to say that your choices do impact your quality of life, and Apple's product is going to be one of those things that helps hold you accountable. Just like a financial coach is really good when they hold you accountable to the fact that you didn't hit your budget, or you overspent, or you didn't do what you were supposed to do, which is okay every once in a while, but not okay consistently. If you don't have somebody pointing that out, it's just hard to stay on the course, which is why this could be a real benefit for a lot of people. And that's the beauty of when technology improves our lives, when it helps us to make better and smarter decisions with our health and with our money. So hopefully you'll be one of the subscribers to that service. Now, if you like the 4 things we learned in the markets this week, would you do us a favor? Would you do us a favor by hitting the like button? Hitting the like button helps push our content out to more people so that we can help more people live and give like no one else. Because whenever you talk about God, religion, or money, it seems that we get suppressed a little bit on this service. So help us beat those odds by hitting the like button, as well as if you hit the subscribe button. The subscribe button allows our content as we create it and push it out to come to you first in your YouTube feed. As well as if you'd like to meet with any of our financial coaches help you in baby steps 1, 2, and 3. They'll help you get out of debt. They'll help you stay out of debt. They'll help you live on a budget. They'll be your accountability partner. You can click the link in the comments, as well as you can also schedule a meeting with any of our financial planners who help you in baby steps 4, 5, and 6. They'll help you start saving for retirement, help make sure that your retirement investments are appropriate for your goals, risk tolerance, and where you're at in the retirement life cycle, as well as help you save for your kids' college, help you save for other goals, help you pay off your house, figure out a plan to pay off your house, so eventually you can live and give like no one else. Thanks so much. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.